Hi. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. Sorry about we had some little technical difficulties here. So today we're going to kind of extend some of our discussion that we've been having on tolling in the region. So as many of you know, we have a few projects coming forward, particularly on I-80 and I-5 in the Sacramento region that are looking at managed lanes and toll facilities. Last month, we did a presentation to the Strategic Planning Committee, talking a little bit about tolling in the region and where we are in that process. And a little history. So, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, pricing strategies such as tolling is in our current MTP SCS and is likely to continue to be a key strategy in the blueprint as we move forward with that project and process. And so, you know, there's all different sorts of ways to go about it. And there's single lane, there's multi-lane, and we have a mix of those in our current MTP SCS as strategies, including I-5 and YOLO 80. So some of the next steps that we've been looking at are how we would be governing this, which is what we talked to the Strategic Planning Committee about last month. But today we have invited a guest to come and talk about some more details related to the operations side, because once we start getting into the JPA aspect and the governance aspect, we're essentially standing up some sort of authority or some sort of organization that will be responsible for the actual operations of the toll facilities in our region. So John Lowry is here today from Alameda County Transportation Commission. He's the director of tolling operations, I think is his official title, but he can correct that. But he's going to talk a little bit about tolling operations, lessons learned from Alameda County, and then we'll have some time for discussion and questions afterwards. So I'm going to turn it over to John. Are you able to share your screen? I know you have a presentation.
Let me check that right now. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you great.
Okay, let's see if this works.
Perfect, we can see it.
You can, okay, good. Let me get situated here. Okay. Well, thanks, Christina, and thanks to everybody. Thanks for having me today. Excited to talk a little bit about experiences here at Alameda CTC with respect to tolling operations, specifically express lane operations. Again, I'm John Lowry. I'm the director of express lane operations here at the Alameda County Transportation Commission. So I'm just going to jump right into it here. Start with a little bit of just background for those who may not know what Alameda County Transportation Commission is. Essentially, we plan, fund, and deliver numerous transportation projects throughout Alameda County. And we also administer the county's 1% sales tax that was approved by voters in 2014. The first bullet here is really the bulk of what we do as an agency, but we also happen to be an express lanes operator, and that's primarily what my job is focused on. So I'll talk a little bit more about our particular express lanes program here, just to set the stage a little bit. You know, here in the Bay Area, we have been making progress on a planned 550-mile express lanes network. The map here shows our progress so far. The blue lanes are in operation. The red lanes are under construction, although the segment here on Highway 101 in San Mateo County has since opened earlier this year, so I need to get a new map. Anyway, the lanes highlighted here in yellow are those that are operated here by Alameda CTC. They include the 580 and the 680 corridors, and I'll just briefly talk about each one. The I-680 express lanes actually happened to be the first express lane here in the Bay Area. It originally opened in 2010, just in the southbound direction. It's about 14 miles long. We paused tolling collection in August of 2020 due to some construction activities and the need to upgrade our system. And we since have reopened. We actually reopened earlier this year and opened both the southbound and the northbound direction. So that project is up and running again. And then the 580 express lanes, similar in length. It opened in February 2016. It's a pretty heavily traveled corridor into and out of the Central Valley, and currently 13.1 million gross revenue for 2022. So that's a little bit just overview of, Alameda County, our express lanes, but the bulk of the presentation today, I was planning to sort of cover a variety of tolling operations topics here. So really looking at everything that comes after you've done everything to design, install, and open an express lane. Each of the circles here could easily warrant their own focused discussions, but I'm going to try and touch on each of them at a high level to just kind of give a flavor of what tolling operations looks like. And because I'm going to be jumping around to these sort of various topics, I'm happy to pause and take questions as they come up. I think I can kind of see maybe when hands get raised, but I don't know if Christina or others, you can kind of just shout at me if somebody's got a hand raised, and I'm happy to, don't feel free to interrupt me. So let's get into some of these topic areas here. And starting with customer service operations, because it is probably the largest in scale when it comes to all of the tolling operations functions. There are different models for customer service. Well, first I'll start with, what customer service is when we're talking about express lanes. This is kind of everything that kind of touches your customers, really, like the account management functions, getting toll tags ordered and distributed, the folks who are staffing the call centers and the walk-up centers to help customers resolve issues, make payments, those sorts of things. We often have, robust, cash payment networks via kiosks that are set up and made easy for folks who want to pay by cash. And then, of course, here's where all of our, billing and violations processing functions take place. Kind of on the, lessons learned or kind of experience side, there are different models for customer service centers. For example, in Southern California, each tolling authority down there has their own customer service center. And I think that's really driven by the fact that the tolling facilities there are really, sort of spread out, and operators want to make sure that they have sort of a locally focused customer service center for their, their corridor and their customers. Here in the Bay Area, on the other hand, we have a single customer service center, both for the toll bridges and for all of the express lanes in the region. Obviously, the Bay Area is very different from Southern California, but really, one of the bigger differences was that we really had a long legacy of tolling here on the bridges before the express lanes even came on the scene. So there are benefits of, taking advantage of that infrastructure, customer service center infrastructure, and familiarity that was already sort of established here. As you could probably imagine, developing a customer service center from, the ground up is quite an undertaking. So there are benefits to pooling resources when it comes to that. Another significant function of tolling operations is kind of the day-to-day monitoring of the lanes. Our express lanes are, responding to real-time conditions, and the whole point is to be able to accommodate when traffic conditions change. That, a lot of that is done by technology, but a lot of it is also done by, eyes on computer screens, monitoring CCTV cameras, dashboards, alerts, and things like that. Usually this is done in some sort of a traffic management center. The top right picture here is what Alameda CTC's former traffic management center used to look like. It was essentially an office with a bunch of screens and monitors where we could look at all the various roadway elements. We've since moved to a model where we now have one regional operations center where operators there not only monitor Alameda CTC's lanes, but also monitor MTC's express lanes. Again, kind of on the theme of sharing this resource. For us, it made sense, and it actually ended up saving us some costs. And rather than having to operate our own traffic management center and have our own staff, we can now kind of share this regional operations center And so that's working well for us. And so, you know, some of the functions of that operation are shown here. You know, the operators are really there when there are incidents in the lane to override signs and to change tolling functions. We're coordinating with Caltrans and CHP during those incidents and kind of responding as they direct us to. Toll overrides are another big component here. When there are incidents that impact operations, we do toll overrides. And then there's all the alerts and things that the dashboards show us when there are equipment failures or service needs and things of that sort. So a big day-to-day kind of labor-intensive effort to just keep an eye on things when you're in tolling. In addition to sort of the day-to-day stuff, we also monitor, you know, traffic performance over time, really to assess how the lanes are performing, and to really inform if action is needed. Action needs to be taken, you know, including, do we need to change our toll rates if we're noticing a traffic performance issue? You know, all express lanes are subject to federal performance standards defined in Title 23 of the US Code, which require that both HOV and express lanes maintain an average 45-mile-per-hour speed during peak periods. And it even gets more complex than that. I think it has to be at least 90% of the time. And basically any facility that doesn't meet that performance standard, Caltrans is required to prepare an annual action plan that sort of details the steps that are going to be taken to bring any degraded facilities into compliance. So performance monitoring is obviously a huge aspect of operations to make sure you're meeting those standards. Here at Alameda CTC, we report to our commission on a quarterly basis on the performance of our express lanes. You can see some of the different metrics and graphics here that we use to highlight how the lanes are doing. We develop these heat maps that show, you know, express lane speeds in comparison to general purpose lane speeds. And we report on the makeup of, you know, express lane trips, including the percentage of those declaring to be HOVs, those that are toll paying, violators. And then we also, you know, sort of show trends over time to kind of compare, like, at this time last year, you know, how are we doing versus today? As you can imagine, you know, during the pandemic, we really saw, you know, conditions, usage of the lanes really go down. So that trend monitoring since the start of the pandemic has sort of been slowly showing, you know, things kind of ticking back up to normal. And in fact, this last summer, we're actually starting to see usage starting to look like what it did before the pandemic hit. So here we are, you know, 3 years later, seeing that. You know, there's a lot that goes into making sure that the toll system itself, all of the infrastructure that's out there on the roadway, is operating properly and is being maintained. You know, it's typical that we have toll system integration contracts that are really designed to be kind of soup to nuts. And they include, you know, all of the upfront work to design, test, install, get the lanes open. But then they often include, they usually include a period after the fact of operations and maintenance, where the toll system integrators for a monthly fee is on the hook to make sure that the system is operating as it should after that. These integration contracts typically include, you know, pretty rigorous system requirements and key performance indicators that really spell out how the system is supposed to be operating, as well as the consequences, usually financial consequences, if they're not meeting those standards. You know, for example, there's often requirements that specify that the accuracy needs to be 99.9%. And if it's not meeting that, there's a financial deduction that's taken off of the monthly O&M payments. The toll system integrator is also responsible for doing the routine preventative maintenance, making sure those, you know, cameras are clean, tuning the antennas, things like that. And of course, repairing and replacing any equipment that, malfunctions or fails, and keeping our software up to date. Here at Alameda CTC, we also rely on Caltrans for some of our maintenance needs. You can see some of the pictures here, some infrastructure that we've experienced damage, cabinets that have been struck by vehicles, a sign that got kind of charred in a vehicle fire. And so, those are obviously outside of the scope of the toll system themselves, signage and power infrastructure cabinets. And so we have a partnership with Caltrans to help us when we have those kinds of needs. Caltrans also, sweeps our lanes regularly as well. Wanted to really quickly sort of touch on enforcement because it's a very critical component of express lane operations, but it's also one that we're pretty reliant on CHP to be out there and enforce. The way it works is that CHP really signs up voluntarily for express lane enforcement shifts. So we can really see coverage vary from day to day, month to month, depending on kind of what's going on and what other draws there may be on CHP resources. But that's the tool we have today. And so and we find that just having presence out there, people seeing that there are patrols out there and that somebody's watching, goes a long way. It's not so much how many vehicles are we pulling over or anything like that, but it's really, I think there's a big benefit just to having some presence out there and having that visibility. CHP, we rely on them to enforce the occupancy and making sure that those who declare to have multiple vehicle occupants to get a toll discount actually have those people in their car, which is not an easy thing to enforce. If you can imagine being a CHP vehicle, either parked and trying to watch 65, 70, 75, 80 mile an hour vehicles fly by and count the number of people in them, it's not an easy job. We try to do our best to design, pull off spaces and technology tools that they can use to look things up. But as you can imagine, it's a pretty hard job. There's a number of emerging technologies. I show a couple of them here on the screen. I've highlighted two really. One, a technology that uses multiple technologies actually that use smartphones as a way to verify and communicate the number of people in a car. And then the other, kind of camp is a roadside camera technology, infrared cameras that are able to, verify the number of people in a vehicle based on heat signatures. We are actually not Alameda CTC, but others in the Bay Area are piloting some of these technologies. So we are eagerly awaiting to see how those pilots play out. But it remains to be seen if and when these kinds of technologies may be viable for use. Okay, now to touch a little bit on the revenue and cost side. There can sometimes be a big focus on the potential for express lane revenues to be used for all kinds of things, right? But as operators, we really need to make sure that we can cover our costs before we, realize any excess revenue. And this waterfall sort of chart here is intended to illustrate some of those cost considerations that come into play. First and foremost, you need to pay your bills, right? Your utility bills. You need to pay for CHP to be out there. The customer service costs. Those folks that are monitoring your lanes. You need to be able to cover just sort of the day-to-day operations. A lot of the things I already talked about. In addition to the day-to-day costs, we need to be able to cover the cost of any rehabilitation, needs. The average toll system lasts, 5 to 7 years before elements start to fail and need replacing. So you want to make sure that you've got you've got the funds to be able to do that when you need to. Then you really got to consider, various types of reserve funds to account for, unknowns. The pandemic really showed us how vulnerable express lanes are to changes in traffic. So it's good practice to maintain reserves to cover the bills in the event that revenues, drop. We also need to be prepared in case of, an emergency or natural disaster. We got wildfires, we got floods, we got earthquakes. We're on the hook if any of that, if anything gets damaged, substantially, we need to be able to bring it back into service. And then, on top of that, there may, and this varies, but there may be a need to fund, continued build out of the express lanes. Here in the Bay Area, some of the operators here have taken out loans or borrowed against future funds to kind of, fill funding gaps for projects to expand our network. And these funds need to be paid back with toll revenues. So that's another thing to consider too, that sometimes you need to build out the full network before you get to a point where you can recognize excess revenue that can be used for other things. State statute does require that remaining revenue at the end of the day go back into the corridor in which it's generated, and that expenditure plans be developed to specify the use of those funds. And here at Alameda CTC, we're actually working on an update to our expenditure plan, but for both of our corridors, one of which we're expanding. So we need to update our expenditure plan to show the projections for that expansion in the future. So a lot goes into, projecting your revenues, which it's, like I said, very highly variable with the express lanes. Toll bridges and toll roads, I think, are a little bit different in that, maybe a little bit easier to sort of predict, but express lanes, because they're purely there by, by choice and really dependent on traffic, it can be a lot harder. Providing information and engaging with the public is another big part of operations. Making sure people understand how the lanes work, for which we have, a website and graphics. We have how-to videos, we have FAQs, all kinds of materials that we hope help when the public has questions about just exactly how to use the lanes. I would say here in the Bay Area, we are very conscious and have, very great partnership amongst all the operators here to make sure that we operate as seamlessly as possible and as consistently as possible, so that customers don't have to worry about which operators lanes they're on, that we kind of have a standard set of business rules that customers can get used to and drive on our entire system. Obviously, we need to let folks know about how they can sign up for Fast Track, that they need to sign up for Fast Track, and how to sign up for Fast Track, how to get their toll tags, how to get the right kind of toll tag. We've got now the switchable toll tag that allows high occupancy vehicles to declare how many vehicle occupants they have and get toll discounts. We also now have cleaner vehicle toll tags that allow designated cleaner vehicles to receive a toll discount. So keeping those things straight and making sure customers understand which toll tag they need to get what's right for them is important. And then here we're constantly having new express lane openings, so that often involves kind of pretty robust public messaging campaigns where we'll have all kinds of things from print media, social media, radio, TV, variety of other sources, well in advance of the lane opening, to make sure folks know that tolling will be in effect as of a certain date. Similarly, when we change our operations, and I guess the most recent example of this would be, there was a period where clean air vehicles were able to use express lanes free of charge, 100% discount. And we changed that not too long ago to a 50% discount after seeing the throughput and the number of cleaner vehicles increase over time, needing to implement a 50% toll. So of course, having a big, messaging campaign to make sure all of those who are cleaner vehicles and using express lanes know the new requirements to get this special toll tag, and that they would be on the hook for a 50% toll as of that period. Just a couple more slides here. Policy, I wanted to just sort of kind of highlight here that policy is informed by, a variety of things. Of course, every operator has their toll ordinance, which is kind of the, official document that specifies the usage requirements of the lane. Developing and amending a toll ordinance is a process that requires, public noticing and board/commission action. But this is where you kind of lay out, the requirements for use of the lane, and whatever violation, whatever the consequences might be for not following those rules. Then you also have what we call business rules, which are sort of, govern the parameters, I guess you'd say, of the toll system itself. So oftentimes these aren't, in some kind of a formal document. They can be, but they define things like, how the dynamic pricing, for example, works. And, dynamic pricing is what a lot of express lanes use, where the price changes based on, real-time traffic conditions. Well, there's a lot that goes into that. How frequently can the price change, and by how much, and what's our minimum and what's our maximum, all of those kinds of things get documented in your business rules. There are quite a few, Caltrans is obviously, very invested in express lane operations, and particularly when it comes to things like, the hours of operation and the occupancy requirement, have a particular stake in those specific policies, as well as others. I think, here in the Bay Area, we have a forum here that I kind of show on the right, called the Bay Area Express Lanes Executive Steering Committee, which consists of all of the operators, as well as Caltrans and CHP, to sort of talk about these policies, what folks are thinking about, where the region might want to change things, and sort of get concurrence among all the operators before we all go to our respective boards to enact any kind of policy changes. So that's really been a great forum to make sure that things stay consistent, that everybody feels vested in what's going on with the express lanes. We also have the California Toll Operators Committee, which is a committee that consists of all of the operators in California. That's another great forum to promote interoperability, consistency between Northern California and Southern California to the greatest extent possible. So those are ways that we help achieve consistency. We also got to be mindful of legislation. A recent example here, legislation that was passed last year had a number of requirements around violation penalties, and the requirement that toll facilities in California offer payment plans for designated low-income individuals. And we actually, here in the Bay Area, the legislation did not require that express lanes implement the payment plan until 2024, but that toll bridges needed to implement it by 2023. So here in the Bay Area, we came together and decided to enact one payment plan for all toll customers here in the Bay Area, and we got that off the ground July 1st, 2023. Whereas I think maybe some of the Southern California toll operators, express lane operators, have until July 2024 to do that. But there are also things about violation penalty and fee caps, and what kinds of vehicles need to be exempt from paying tolls that are also specified in legislation. So just to kind of give a flavor of where policy touches sort of a lot of things. And then wanted to talk a little bit about, equity, which is of course a big focus, not just for express lanes, but it's something that I think a lot of express lane operators are trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. There's really no guidebook or guidance around this, what equity means and what an equity program means specifically for an express lane project, and how an express lane project should have operating practices or policies to address equity. So here in the Bay Area, we've kind of taken the approach of pilots, and I'm showing two that are here in the Bay Area. One is MTC's toll discount pilot. They've branded Express Lane Start, which is a 1.5-year trial program where they are offering low-income drivers a 50% toll discount for a particular corridor, the I-880 express lanes. And they have a robust plan to do, a lot of data collection, surveys, to sort of report along that 18-month period. And the goal is really to inform if and how this program could play out in the future. As you can imagine, there's a lot of concerns around what this might do to express lane operations if it's heavily utilized, and there are a lot of people who participate in the program. Will that adversely impact express lane operations? So the questions that have come up like that will be sort of addressed in the evaluation after the pilot is completed. And then in San Mateo County, they operate the 101 express lanes. They've implemented what they call a community transportation benefits program, where San Mateo County residents with certain income requirements can opt to receive either a $100 transit pass clipper card that they actually can get annually, or a toll tag with a preloaded balance of $100 to use the express lanes as they'd like to. So that's a program that just kicked off when that corridor opened not too long ago. So again, I think that the plan is to sort of evaluate that program and make any tweaks based on any feedback or how the program goes. And yeah, with that, I've kind of jumped around to a lot of different teased out a lot of different topics. I'm happy to take any questions, but thank you for your time.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. So I'm not able to see if anybody has their hands up. So I know that Karen on our end is going to be monitoring that. But does anybody who's a panelist? Oh, Director Lozano, I think I can see you. Do you have a question?
I do. Thank you. And I did just put it up. So one of the questions I had when you were talking about exempt drivers for these toll lanes, what would be an example or a couple of examples of exempt drivers having not really had the opportunity to experience driving in a toll lane, but what does that look like?
Right now, exemptions are primarily focused on emergency vehicles that are actively responding to an emergency, buses, of course, motorcycles. And, there has been a lot of conversation. In fact, I think there was even legislation that was recently passed, didn't apply to express lanes, but it did apply to toll bridges, that vehicles with disabled veterans plates qualify for an exemption on certain toll facilities. So that's kind of the flavor of what exists currently.
Okay, and are those exemptions legislative or in terms of state law, or do you have any local exemptions that you allow for?
No, those are all statewide exemptions. I don't know of any That might, you know, that in Southern California, I do think they may have some locally specific exemptions. And one example, I think the SR 91 express lanes, which has been in operation for a very, very long time, I think they have some other exemptions that only apply to their facility, but I don't know what they are off the top of my head.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And great presentation. I thank you for taking the time.
Anybody else have any questions? I really appreciate, John, you taking the time today. You know, it's a super complicated world, tolling and all the operations behind it. And, you know, as a region right now that doesn't really operate any of them now, we don't really know all of these nitty gritty details. So as we start to embark on this journey towards tolling and managed lanes, it's really helpful for us to understand what actually goes into it all. We just kind of drive on them when we go to the Bay Area, and I don't think we think too much about it. So super important for us to really consider all of this as we move forward with the next stages. You know, just an important thing for folks to know is, you know, this is obviously one of many presentations and just discussions in general on managed lanes and tolling. So, you know, this conversation is going to keep going, and we're going to have a lot more information to share and process to share. And these are active projects that we're really hoping to be able to move forward here and hope to start to implement some of these things that John has talked about. So definitely, you know, we'll make sure that everybody is still engaged as we go through this. I don't see anybody else's hands up for any other questions. I'm not able to see attendees, but Karen, if you know, message me if you see anyone. But if not, we can end the luncheon early and just appreciate everybody taking the time. And please do feel free to reach out to me, and I can direct any questions to John if you do have any that he might be able to answer. But we do appreciate everybody coming on and joining us today, especially you, John. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
All right, take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.